First-time buyers are screwed. And look, I know that is a very negative and unhelpful statement, but I promise you, stick with me here, because in this video, I'm not only going to walk you through the challenges for, in reality, all buyers and property investors, not just first-time buyers, but I'm also going to take you through tips to beat the market, ways to get on the housing ladder sooner, but importantly, how to make sure you keep rising up the ladder. Because in every hard market, there is opportunity, and in reality, the only way to beat the average is to go about things in a way the average person doesn't. And in case you don't know me, I'm William Gale, and I've spent since 2012 building a UK-wide home buying company, British Home Buyers, and nationwide estate agency British Home Sellers, that's dealt with over 13,000 transactions totaling about £3.3 billion of property. So I've spent over a decade observing the good and the bad things that buyers do all the time, and in this video I share all. Let's get into it. Why are first-time buyers, all buyers, screwed? There are two core barriers to entry for buyers right now. They are, one, getting a mortgage, and two, having enough cash for the deposit, stamp duty and fees. And this graph perfectly illustrates the challenges between each over the last 50 years. You can see the green line represents the percentage change in the amount of deposit needed to purchase a property. So you can see back in the 70s, all the way to the turn of the century in 2000, this was less of an issue. It's really from the year 2000 onwards is where we've seen this explosion of the amount of deposit needed to purchase property. Whereas when you look at the orange line, the level of repayments has always been relatively stable. Yes, there was a huge spike in the 90s, and it has been increasing more recently. But I think for most people that are renting right now, for instance, the issue isn't paying the rent, which is usually higher than what the mortgage would be on the property they live in. It's actually accumulating the deposit to actually purchase the property they live in. So look, I appreciate for a lot of people, the issue is not just the deposit, but also affording the mortgage. But irrespective, the tips I'm about to go through are all about helping everyone become more savvy about how they look at property. So how can you beat the market? I will get to how to overcome the deposit problem for most buyers later. But before I do, it's important to stress that for any property buyer, whether you're a first-time buyer or looking to work your way up or down the housing ladder, everything starts with looking at property as an investment as well as a home. I see far too often when people go house hunting, they're overly focused on the left circle here. They're focused on essentially falling in love with the property, imagining themselves living there. And of course, all those things are important. But in reality, every buyer, especially first-time buyers, need to focus on the right-hand circle. Focus on a home purchase being a fantastic investment. You want to make sure you, in reality, compromise the things on the left side, and importantly, don't compromise anything on the right side to find a happy balance in between. So don't buy in a popular area, buy in an up-and-coming area, buy the worst house on the best street so that you can add value to it over the time you live there. All that kind of stuff. It still shocks me how buyers flock to new build properties. By doing this, you are essentially guaranteeing that you are buying a property that is difficult to add value to. Instead, you're just relying on the organic inflation of house prices over time, which when it comes to upsizing will mean you will have a far smaller pot of equity to use as a deposit on your next property. You need to find properties that you can afford that over time you can develop into a property you can't afford. For instance, I bought this house and turned it into this house. Now that didn't happen all at once. I bought the house whilst I lived there for a couple of years. I got planning sorted, I saved and perfected what I wanted done. Then when the time was right, I got the work done. And the overall outcome is I have a property worth twice the price I paid, having spent nowhere near that amount overall. That equity I've created is tax-free and will help me hugely if I ever want to upsize in the future. But it's not just adding value to your property that will catapult you up the housing ladder later. You want to buy a home that also generates you an income. If you can buy something you can perhaps let part of out, a room, a converted garage, not only are you helping cover the mortgage, but you're creating income that can be put towards a future deposit. That perhaps all sounds simple, but how does this work in practice? Well, every single first-time buyer, in my view, especially if you're single, should consider the rent-a-room scheme. It allows you to earn $7,500 per year tax-free when renting a room in your home. So if you're a 20% taxpayer, that's the equivalent of a 9k pay rise. Or if you're a 40% taxpayer, that's a 12k pay rise. Whatever income you get your home to produce, it's ultimately money in the bank to invest in your home or towards your next home. I want to encourage you all to be savvy here. It might be converting a garage into accommodation, or turning a garden office into a granny annex you rent. For instance, when I have holidays planned, I put my home on Airbnb and that generates me thousands of pounds in extra income I then use to pay down the mortgage, which will help me upsize later. There are so many ways to turn your home into a cash generating asset rather than just a cost. I know someone that put a TP tent in a part of their garden they holiday let out, for instance. Comment below any ways you've managed to make your home a cash generating asset, or any ideas you've got that might give someone watching this inspiration. But none of this solves the deposit problem for a first-time buyer. Or does it? How to solve the deposit problem. Now, I'm assuming you know all the obvious things, like you can open a lifetime ISA, you put 4k a year in, and the government adds 1k a year tax-free that you can then use to buy your first home or get access to at retirement. Or you can access the first home scheme. It allows you to buy properties in a shared ownership type format, but there are eligibility constraints to that. Or of course, you can get up to 95% mortgages backed by the government. But in reality, the more savvy way to overcome the deposit problem is to work out how much deposit you can afford and buy the best investment property possible. Now hear me out here, because for most people out there, you may have money saved, but just not enough to buy the property you want in an area you want. So you think to yourself, I'll just save for a bit longer. But at the same time you're saving, property prices are slowly increasing at the same time. What you do instead is you use your money you have to invest in a buy-to-let property in an area that you can afford, but importantly, where house prices are likely to grow at faster rates than where you live right now or want to live. It might be 100 miles away from where you live, but who cares? You invest. You're then essentially on the property ladder with your money growing in value, with your property building equity, but importantly, it's generating you in income. When the time is right, you sell and you have the deposit to buy your home. That's what I did. I bought initially one buy-to-let in an area I could afford, but then over time, 3 more properties. I knew those properties would go up in value, and that all helped me ultimately buy my 5th property, which ended up being my home. If you want average results, do average things. But if you want to beat the average, you need to think outside the box and how you view your home or your desire to buy a home. Another key thing to remember with all of this is you get the ultimate tax break on your home, the ultimate tax break. If you follow my advice and you buy a property you can add value to, not only will you see the equity in your home climb in value over and beyond the average buyer that buys the perfect house, but all that extra value is tax free. There is no capital gains tax when your home goes up in value. Make the most of that, because if you add 20 grand of value in your home by spending your weekends doing home improvements, repainting it, making the garden look awesome, converting the garage into a gym, that 20k of added value is more like 30k of pre-tax earnings. Anyway, like and subscribe to see more of me, and I'll see you in the next video up here.